quickly about my recent trip to Sri Lanka and a little bit of, to start with, the travel anxiety that I had before I went. It's something a lot of seasoned travellers probably don't mention, travel anxiety. But yeah, even though I've been to over 100 countries, I still get this kind of anxiety when I'm going somewhere new by myself. So you may laugh, but what I did was I joined a tour and that really helped. And then I just thought about the things that were going to scare me before I left, which are things that have happened to me in the past: running out of money, not being able to get from the airport. They're basically the two big things, you know, and safety. So what I did was I organised a transfer, which was basically useless. I paid about 4 times what you'd pay for an Uber, and Uber is about $8 to Negombo from Colombo. Negombo is actually closer than Colombo itself. It's only a sort of 20-minute drive. So I think it was $6 in the Uber, or I paid $28 for a transfer, and they basically just picked me up next to where all the Uber people were standing. So it was 2 a.m. and I was just exhausted, and I was happy to pay that money for the assurity of having a ride. And then using the ATMs was totally fine. I made sure I had 3 different bank cards, and as well as Australian dollars, which I could have exchanged if I had needed to. And I also used them to pay for tips. So yes, I had a brilliant time. It was just as good as I expected. I was kind of worried. I've been to India twice, and both times I found it, while it's fascinating, it's also so hectic, and I was a lot younger then, and I got so hassled just continually, to the point where I just wore a sarong over my head all day, every day, a soaking wet sarong because I was so hot, just to get people to stop running towards me in the street. But I was more younger and more blonde, so maybe that had something to do with it. But anyway, Sri Lanka is a completely different country. Nobody hassled me. They're very friendly. They often stop to say hello, but no one ever gave me a hard time. And it also feels really just great to kind of walk around. I didn't see other tourists. Every morning I got up early, I waited for sunrise, and then I'd walk around in the local area where I was. And I would try to find out beforehand if this was safe or not to do. And I'd go for a good hour or 2-hour walk, and just watch local fishermen or kids going to school. When I was on the east coast near Yala National Park, I went for a walk instead of going to the national park, and I noticed there were giant elephant turds where I was walking. So that was kind of freaky, but I thought, oh look, if something happens, I'll just knock on the door of somebody's house and ask for shelter, I guess. There was also peacocks jumping off roofs and flying their beautiful long arc over me. Amazing bird life. So to segue to the national park, that was probably actually the low life of my trip, because we went in these jeeps which just join up with hundreds of other jeeps. They're open topped, and it just feels like a huge parking lot. The first jeep will stop when they see an elephant or something, and then because it's a narrow road, every jeep after them will back up, and you might sort of get 2 abreast, but then all the exhaust is going into the air, and you'll sit there for maybe 20 minutes while the people at the front look at elephants or whatever it is they're looking at, and then by the time you start moving again, whatever it was that was there is then gone. And it's just a giant shit fight, to be honest. And I was at the back of the Jeep. There's only 2 rows of seats, but it's really, really jumpy. Someone had told me to wear a sports bra, which was good advice. But then I was starting to feel very ordinary. I don't often get car sick, but I was definitely feeling a bit car sick. And then we would just sit there for ages with exhaust in our faces. I had a scarf over my mouth, just trying to avoid all the toxins. It was just kind of insane. And then I just decided to enjoy watching the other tourists. Like, a German woman was crying because she'd seen an elephant. She was so happy, and I thought, you know, sometimes all you can do is just watch other tourists acting so strange. Well, in this case, they weren't acting that strange. They were just delighted. But we did see some elephants in the distance, and a guy on our tour was a twitcher. Like, he loved birds, so he saw lots of birds and he was naming the birds. But the next day we had a one that I'd paid for at $100 to go on basically exactly the same tour, and luckily this twitcher guy had not done that tour, so we swapped. And that was the morning I just walked around, and I had a really lovely quiet morning with no exhaust. And then we had a second tour included in our trip the following day in a different national park, and unfortunately it was exactly the same. And this driver was even worse. He was chewing betel nut. He was, you know, red-eyed and off his face. He couldn't understand if we said stop. He didn't seem to understand the word stop at all. And he was just racing past trees. My friend got a tree in her face because we were standing up over the thing, and yeah, and he was really, really sorry about that. But yeah, it was just kind of a shit fight. So if you can, with the tour, if you are going to go to a national park, if you can find one that's more quiet, that has less people. We did a really early morning one and a late evening one, and they were both just awful. So if you can find somewhere that's not so crowded, that would be great. And also, if you can find a driver who speaks English, and then just say, look, you're happy to go where the other cars are not going, happy to be 10 minutes behind everyone. Our friends had a really good driver, and they were 10 minutes behind everyone, and they actually saw a leopard, and they had a great time. So it does make a difference to just be a little bit away from the pack, I think. But yeah, that was the low light. The highlight was then we went up into the mountains, up to Yala and Nuriwaya Eliya, which is like an old British kind of bastion where they have all the tea plantations and lots of colonial buildings. They also had the Dutch and the Portuguese there. And it was misty, it wasn't hot, and you get to catch the train. We caught the train across the Nine Arches Bridge, and it's just amazing to watch the Instagrammers. Talk about tourists acting weird. All the Instagrammers put on, you know, amazing dresses and throw their bodies out the train and get that shot of, you know, the hair flying out the window. And there were lots of people doing that. I did that. It was good fun. Word of warning, make sure you're looking forward so you can see there's going to be trees coming rather than looking backwards. That's probably obvious, but always good to know. And another thing we did was a really cool cooking class. Basically, I ate curry every single day, which might sound boring, but they have the best curries. They've got jackfruit curry, papaya curry, pumpkin curry, potato curry. They're incredible with vegetables because meat is obviously a rich man's thing. So a lot of the curries are vegetarian, and then seafood curries, and also if you like chicken curry or lamb curry, or you generally get 3 different curries with rice for really not much money. I was eating in fancy hotels, and it was still only about $10 for an amazing curry, and then that would be enough to see me through to dinner. I would just get a little bit takeaway and then eat that later on because the servings are huge. But the chef gave me this, a printout of the recipes that we learnt to make from scratch, and I think it's my best souvenir. He actually put his WhatsApp number on it, Chef Apollonius. So I had a huge dinner party last night with all my friends. We had 4 different curries, so I'm gonna have to text the chef some photos of our dinner party to thank him, because yeah, it's a great thing to be able to make all that kind of stuff for your friends. And speaking of that, things like I just bought these little masala. This is a good souvenir, like little curry packets that you can buy just in the supermarket. They're 50 cents or something, it costs nothing, and you get Sri Lankan curry powder. I also got like the cool, this is the spice tea, like it's just ginger, cardamom, cinnamon, coriander, cumin, and anise. And then of course their own tea. This I just got this from the supermarket, but it's BOPF, which we learnt on the tea farm means best of something something. It's like the first leaf or the tip of the leaf, which is the best part. I'll have to include it. I can't remember what BOPF exactly stands for. And yeah, we didn't see a lot of tourist shops. I think in Ella there was one kind of souvenir shop, and I bought these beautiful necklaces for my daughters, this one and a light blue one. But I think it was about $50 for the two of them, plus some little prayer flags. So not like cheap, but probably handmade. Like they're really beautiful. And at an Ayurvedic farm, I got some cinnamon oil, which I highly recommend. It smells beautiful. And a young mother was standing with her baby near our bus, and she was just selling these little packets of cinnamon incense. They were like $1. So yeah, I would always recommend, if you see mums or women, you know, selling something, I always try and buy what they're selling. It never costs much, and you know, they're not going to go get drunk and waste the money. The money's going to go to their children and to education generally. I know that's a generalization, but support the mothers, support the women. And it's a strong tipping culture too in Sri Lanka. So as a guide, we were asked to tip 10 Australian dollars a day for our guide. So about 70 Australian dollars, which is about 50 US or 50 euro. And then 20 for the driver and 10 for his assistant. So I just had about 200 Australian dollars that I used for tips, and they were happy to have Australian dollars. So that's always something to keep in mind, just to have that spare money. And there's always porters and people that will help you with your bags, and people that will help you. And at first I was kind of funny about that. I was like, I can just carry my own bag. But then I realized, oh, it's their culture. There's a man standing there waiting to help. He needs the money, so go with it, pay that small amount of money, and you know, it's all fine. And you can have a conversation on the way. You can practice your Singala, which extends for me as far as Ayubowan, which is the old-fashioned word for hello, Ayubowan, and Istuthi, which is thank you. I just thought Tuthi, Istuthi. That's about all I think I learned, which isn't great, but hey, you just try, you keep trying. Yeah, and so we kind of did the loop. Most people in Sri Lanka, in the months that I went, which it's February, so January, February, March, April, in the dry season for the northwest. Yeah, it's northwest. They'll go to Colombo, Yala, and then up into the mountains to Yala, Nuriwaya Eliya, Kandy, and then we went up to Sirigaya Rock, which is very cool. I didn't know anything about it before we went, but it's an enormous rock right in the centre of the country, where the king lived 1,600 years ago, and he lived on the top. And he had a swimming pool there and an incredible irrigation system, as well as over 600 pictures of nude women. And then something crazy happened. I think he killed his father and tried to kill his brother, and he had to flee, and he went and lived in a cave, and then all the monks moved in. And there's this incredible, amazing history, which I knew nothing about. It was really cool just to kind of stumble across that, as well as see these incredible Buddha caves where they've carved enormous Buddhas out of granite in the middle of these caves, as well as all these different Buddhas that people have made. And just looking at their hands, like they have the 3 symbols that they do, one for, I'm going to have to remember them. It was something like compassion, impeccability of speech, and kindness, something like that. These 3 beautiful qualities that every Buddhist has at their heart, and it's still so strong in the Sri Lankan culture, which is 80% Buddhist. And that was another thing I really loved, was just seeing Buddhists walking along the street, Muslims walking along the street, Christians, just all the different religions all together and everybody getting along. And it's a really cool thing, even though they have had trouble in the past. In 2019, there were bombings by ISIS in the capital, Colombo, as well as Negombo, in hotels and churches. But all you can do is support the country, and don't live in fear. Just, people would say before, when the war was on, go to Sri Lanka, but get out of Colombo and go south to the beaches, or, somewhere beautiful. And so we went back to Colombo, and the one thing I really missed was actually seeing the beautiful beaches. We got as far as Galle, where the big cricket game was on the next day, Australia versus Sri Lanka, and it's on the coast and it's really beautiful. But just south of there is Marissa Beach, and there's a strong surf culture, meditation culture. You can do retreats. I sort of had thought, oh look, I live in a surf culture place in Australia, I don't need to see another beautiful beach. But I do regret that I didn't go there. So I guess it's always good to have a reason to go back. And the group I was with, they ended up going north, and then they went to Trincomalee Beach, and that night they sent a picture of the full moon rising out of the ocean from Trincomalee Beach. So it faces east, and it just looked so gorgeous. Blue aqua water, white sand. So if it is the monsoon season in the northwest, you can actually go to the southwest. You can go to the northeast, and that would be okay. So Trincomalee might be a beautiful place to go if you want to see a nice beach. But for me, I would definitely go back to Marissa and spend a bit of time perhaps surfing, doing Ayurvedic yoga retreat or something. That kind of thing. And speaking of Ayurvedic, we went to an Ayurvedic farm, which was amazing, just to see all the different plants and herbs being grown in the wild, looking at things like nutmeg, coffee, anything you can imagine, cinnamon. They were kind of scraping the bark, and that's why Sri Lanka is famous. It's the Spice Islands. They were known as Ceylon, and that was what all the trading began, why the Dutch were there, the Portuguese, and then the British. All their spices are incredible. And so we had the opportunity to sort of buy some overpriced things, creams and what have you. That's where I got the cinnamon oil. But I also had 3 different massages when I was there, just at cheaper little places that were along from the hotel. It would be $7 or $10 for a 1-hour massage, an Ayurvedic massage, which is quite different to like the ones I'm used to, which are Thai massages. And with Ayurvedic, they pour oil on your forehead or your head, and it's quite a bit more kind of intense, like using the elbows and the whole body, and definitely all the points on the feet, and how they correlate to the hands. And it was amazing, I have to say. So you can get them in the hotel, where it's going to be about $50 or $100, or you could get them down the road. One thing I would say is, on my first one, I forgot to ask for a female masseuse, and I just didn't know if what the guy was doing was normal, like pulling down my pants and things when I was lying face down. But after Googling it, I think it is completely legit. And he had been in business for like 15 years. He had so many reviews, and I kept telling myself that. And I could hear other clients coming in, so it was okay. But it's just something to keep in mind. If you want to feel just really comfortable, or if it's the first time, you might want to just go in a hotel and have like a foot massage, or just something small, just to kind of ease your way into the customs of what it is, because it is quite different. And you just want to know that everything's safe and above board, especially if you're a younger female or something like that. But that's about all I can really say. In terms of practicalities, there were ATMs, so that was fine. if my card didn't work in one, I would just try it in a different one and it would work. So just depending on, you know, who they're affiliated with. In terms of USBs, every single room I stayed in had the British wall connector. So I used an Australian to British adapter. I had a universal charger, but that seemed to be a bit flimsy in the socket, like it was slipping out. And if I had been desperate, I could probably used a pile of clothes to keep it flush into the wall, but a British adapter is the best. But a lot of rooms also had USB straight into the wall, which is also handy. The older USB, I forget what it's called, not USB-C, but the older, wider one. And yeah, I think that's about it. So if you're worried about going, just go, you'll have a great time. I hope this gave you some enlightenment and hope you like the pictures. Thank you.